All right, I'm back. Yes. I'm gonna be. What does the kids say? I'm gonna be real here. I had a bit of a crash after last week because it was like such a high. I was like getting things done, and I put my video out, and I got such a positive response, and that was like an initial like, wow, that's great. And then it became sort of a, whoa, I like actually need to keep doing this, and what's gonna happen when I get further and there's gonna be problems because I know that the chapters near the end aren't as good and all that. And I started to avalanche a little bit and I actually got a little bit like off my game. I've been a little bit behind this week. So I know this happens to everybody. And so I just want to let you know. I mean, not that I am a what you want to say. I'm not a prolific writer. I don't do this all that much. Again, I'm more of an analyzer than I am a writer. I'm more of an editor, a coach than a writer. But that being said, you would think that somebody who can coach other people could coach themselves really effectively. And to some degree, yes. I mean, I'm here, right? But yeah, I'm a little disappointed with myself. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a C this week. I think I could have been a little more aggressive at getting back into it. But that being said, I'm not going to beat myself up too much. I think I'm going to do all right. And yeah, I'm here. My butt is in the chair. My hands are going to get on the keyboard, and we're going to press on. And I think that's the right attitude to have. So that being said, I'm going to go back into where I was. And I have to remember where I was because I didn't like bookmark for myself, which keep in mind, use as a bookmark. We have our little bookmarks up there. Use them because then I wouldn't have to think about what I did last. So I'm going to figure out where I was last, and then I'm going to proceed as I was doing. Well, so far I'm not hating it still, so this is good. Adding some world building, but yeah, generally pretty happy. I was able to add a little bit of texture here. Again, I'm really enjoying this polish. It is feeling more like a polish though than a crazy edit. We'll see how this goes. All right, struggling a bit here with some emotion. I'm not always the best at thinking of emotion here, so going to try to use a little change the mood. Ah, gotcha. All right, yeah, that'll work. Thank you. All right, one thing I'm going to be doing is making a note for myself for another pass. Um, so I need to look at just general notes. Yep. So I'm going to be adding a note, and this is to make sure scenes start with signposting. Um, Scenes should generally start with something to kind of indicate what the scene's about. You don't want the audience completely like clueless going into it. I mean, sure, you can have a little bit of unexpected excitement and things like that, but you really don't want to have too much of that. You want to have it be pretty clear what we're getting into so that you can get excited about it. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. So yeah, one thing I am still continuing to notice is I have so much dialogue and back forth and back forth. I don't think it's bad, and I don't even know how much I want to change it for this project, but it is something for me to look out for as an artist in the future that I definitely came from the theatrical world. I was thinking of scripts. So if you read my stuff and you're like, wow, Daniel, this is really stark and this is really just straight up conversation. Yeah, it's a it's a dialogue heavy book right now. I think we're about to get into some action, but yeah, it's a lot of dialogue. Okay, so I've made it through and I am actually quite happy. Again, this is that sort of writer angst, right? I'm like, it's not gonna be good, and there's problems and this and that, and then it's like, okay, maybe it's not so bad. And actually, no, I think some of my concern that you probably just heard, because I'm editing all this together, was a little misplaced. I did have more development in the characters than I remembered, because it was somewhat subtle, and really everybody has a pretty major shift as a result of the book. It's just not exactly like called out subplots exactly. So while I was like, okay, I really need to brainstorm a subplot, and to some degree I did try to incorporate a bit more intertwining and things like that. I really haven't like gone through and added like 5,000 words for a subplot right now. Because I was going to start to do that. I brainstormed certain things I could do. And then as I was going through, I was like, I don't really see a place where it's not going to really distract. It's not going to really sidetrack. And I was able to interweave it as basically things that were happening outside of our purview. So people commenting and mentioning things where you're seeing how when we're not watching them, they're doing things on their own and things like that. So, and I know that's like a danger. It's like you're supposed to be dramatizing on the page, but I'm not trying to do multiple POVs in this book, right? So that makes a big difference. This is a single POV book, and so I always would have to have the main character in the scene where these things are taking place, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. And you could say, well, why don't you switch and do multiple POVs? That wasn't my intention. I don't really plan on switching that. I like the tightness of the narrative there because it allows us to not know a lot of things, and it's kind of fun to find out secondhand. So what generally is happening is I just have a few more things in my mind that are happening behind the scenes, and then you're like, oh, that was happening. That's kind of cool. And we'll see if people like it. I like it. I think it makes sense. When it comes to my general concerns, I did notice that it got tighter as it went, and it started to get really fast. And I think that's because I was doing these more tense scenes because about 2/3 into the book, it goes quick. It's like, and I think I may need to slow down my ending a little bit because I think if you think about like the percentages of where we're at, I think what would be like the third act is like maybe 15% of the book, and it really should be more like 20-ish, perhaps. So I'm going to look at that. As you might know, I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of writing action, and I also have said that I'm heavy on dialogue. Now, something that occurred to me is I was like, okay, it feels kind of choppy, but I don't hate it. How bad is this writing? And this is where the writer's desk was really helpful. So I know I'm jumping ahead to line editing, and I'm not supposed to be doing that yet, but again, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. But no, I did take a look at the summary report. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. And I wanted to see what would happen. Now, I figured the summary would be high because I wrote these short sentences that are pretty easy to read. And you might immediately think that a high score is like amazing. And it's not bad. It's just if you're in the really high range, it means you write briskly and perhaps without enough depth. It's a little bit. It can be a little bit uh, flat, or you could say stark or something like that. So you can see I was at a 92, right? That's really high. It's almost a little bit too high for me. But when I compared myself to Brandon Sanderson, which really wasn't somebody I was directly trying to emulate, I got an 85.7, and I'm quite pleased with that. In general, across the board, yeah, I'm quite pleased with it. So it is a very readable book. I'm not that angry about it or anything like that, but I am noticing, and I said this already, my next draft, I've gotta slow things down sometimes, talk about the setting, don't have as much just dialogue, right? I'm not going to get rid of the dialogue because I think all the dialogue is fine. I don't think people are talking for no reason. I just think there's not enough other things going on. And I did notice that just in general, like choreography, emotions, like I just need to do some cramming and studying and force myself out of some bad habits where I just like the talking heads is like, and again, that's because I come from the theatrical world. It's very easy for me. And maybe you're saying, well, Daniel, isn't that your style? It is, but I do think it can be improved upon. But one thing that's interesting is Brandon Sanderson also hates the slow paragraphs. He does have more average words per sentence and paragraph, and I do think this 8.2 it's a bit small. So I'm going to look for opportunities to let my sentences breathe more. I'm not going to say pad my sentences, but I am going to let them breathe more. And you'll notice this like waterfall effect. There are a lot in that top Corey, and then it just like so again, that's something I'm going to be doing. I'm kind of foreshadowing here what I'm going to be doing when I get to line editing. Again, my next edit, so what's going to be on the next episode, as it were, is going to be me talking about overcoming all my habits for um not having whatever you want to say, choreography, blocking in the theatrical world, setting, and also trying to and part of that is going to come with longer sentences. When people talk, they speak in shorter sentences. At least my characters do, because they talk briskly, kind of like me. And I just like that kind of dialogue. That but yeah, when you're describing a beautiful view, you're going to take more time, and so that this is going to adjust these numbers. And I wouldn't be surprised if I actually get a little bit closer to Brandon Sanderson. We're going to find out. Dialogue, I was really scared though about how much dialogue I have, and Brandon Sanderson has a lot of dialogue too. So there we go. 31% to 28%. That's not bad, and I think I can actually move that needle. And again, this is something that occurred to me as I was reading it just naturally. It just felt like there was a lot of dialogue, and so it's nice to see the data supported here in the writer's desk. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, to move that 3%, that's not going to be very much. I think all of my additional, like I said, choreography, setting, that sort of stuff is probably going to make that happen. We'll find out next week, right? So, adverbs. This is a place where I might have an opportunity to actually stretch out sentences with maybe some more adverbs. I was so down on adverbs because I thought they always were kind of evil, and I was really harsh on myself. I was like, only if they are absolutely necessary. There's an adverb for you. But I think that I probably overdid it. I think adverbs for the point of emphasis, for just greater clarity, rhythm of the sentence, especially rhythm of the sentence with some of all those short staccato-y sentences, some adverbs will help. And so that is something I'm going to enable myself, is to, I don't want to just flower them like dandelions. That's what Stephen King calls them, right? But I do think that that's going to be something that's going to be part of this, is not being so fearful of adverbs. Filler words also is a lot lower. Now, again, I think one of the things that this causes is this really tight sound. But I do wonder if I stripped it back so much that it's a little less conversational than I want to be. So again, I don't want to just pad the book, and it's probably not going to shift too much, but it's something to look at. I have almost no passive phrasing because I was terrified of passive phrasing, and perhaps it's something that I could do a little bit more often. I have a lot of cliches. We're going to take a look at that. And yeah, I'm like totally, like I said, skipping the line editing, even though I'm going to do another developmental edit. So don't worry, I'm not completely jumping the gun. But I think it's also kind of nice to see this because it can be in the back of my head as I'm writing the setting. I should have a sense of how I want to write the setting, right? How I want to write action, and I should look out for initial pronouns and names. I can think of passive construction as possibly being in my tool belt. I can think of adverbs as not being as evil, things like that. Not a lot of sentence starters, but neither does Brandon Sanderson. Those can be very difficult. I'm very happy that my generic descriptions are low, because that means I have a high amount of specificity in the language, which was purposeful, and not a lot of repeated words. Now, it's funny that my main character's name is not Aaron, but it's because it goes by I, and I is an eliminated word for the word frequency, so that's why it doesn't show up. But it's all these character names: Jax, Elliot, Aaron, Zach, Shelley, and asks a lot of asking questions. You probably know I'm somebody who likes questions, right? I always say that. I love questions. I love questions in books. I love inquisitive books. I mean, in many ways, this book is a mystery, I would say. It's an information plot. What Rose wants is information, so it's a meaning story. And a lot of characters have meaning journeys. Not all of them, but a lot of the supporting characters do as well. So I will say overall, I'm still pleased with it. I'm not embarrassed at all by this book. I'm not even embarrassed that I put it out there. Now, granted, I did catch some really funny errors. At least I think it's funny, and like I had typos and I had some extra periods and I had some extra spaces and, clumsy stuff that really shouldn't have gone out to the general public. But again, it was a simpler time, right? That's what I'll tell myself. But I mean, it also wasn't like you didn't understand what I meant. No, I'm human. I was just artistically exploring myself. I don't get so upset when people do that. I do think it's important to put your professional self forward, and put your best self forward. And I'm not advocating anybody to be lazy, but I also think, perfection is the enemy of the good, so they say. And I think sometimes we get overly hung up on things like that, right? In terms of the storytelling, I still think it's a fun yarn. I think there's a lot of interesting things about it. I think the world building is really cool. I understand some of the criticisms that people might have had about it, but honestly, I think some of it is just they weren't my audience. And I am really curious, though, to see how I feel about the next two books, because I know the next two books have, in many ways, more intricate plotting. At least that's what I remember. Like I said, I don't really remember the third book very well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, and I did come up with a lot of notes. I have a lot of notes now of things that I want to explore. So I don't know if I can even pull that up. And you can see there all that beautiful brainstorming goodness, and that's just after book one. So I did leave a lot of free money on the ground. I honestly am wondering if some of it is already paid off because again, I don't completely remember what happened to book three, but we're gonna find out as we read book two, book three. But I'm not jumping the gun just yet. Not book one isn't done. So my hope is though. Is with the report like that, it doesn't seem like the line editing is going to be a bear. And so the biggest thing now is to flesh out that setting, flesh out that choreography. I feel like it was a solid start. This was definitely more of a polish than a complete, what do I want to say, renovation, and I'm happy for that. Doesn't exactly shock me because again, the reviews were not awful for it by any stretch, especially for something that I took on pretty much on my own with just a couple of beta readers and a simple edit from somebody. Considering all that, I have to be, going back to this as much as it was like felt like a skeleton in my closet. I actually am rather moved, and I want to give myself some credit. I really do think that if I was my own coach back then, I would be like, yeah, you know what, you're doing things and keep moving forward. And the same kind of feedback I'm saying here, things to improve upon. But yeah, it's great, and this is one reason why too. I think we have to face these things, right? Sometimes I really think we build stuff up in our mind. We're like, oh, I don't know, and everything like that. And no, just put yourself out there, explore. It's probably not as bad as you remember. Now, granted, maybe you'll go back to some old work and you'll be like, oh, actually it's worse. And sometimes that can happen. But I think often we are our own worst critic, and so when we go back, we aren't going to hate it so much. Or even if we feel like we've progressed a lot as an artist, we'll know how to fix it. So don't let the imposter syndrome get you. All right, it kind of got to me back then. That's why I abandoned this project. I'm glad, thanks to opportunities I've had in the last decade to build up my self worth and value and help others. I have a lot more confidence, so it's easier to manage. But yeah, I mean, you probably shouldn't have as much as you do. I mean, I can almost assuredly say that. Very few people. The people that are generally the poor writers, the bad writers, are the ones that think they're all that and a bag of chips and don't have to improve and all of those things. If you're taking it seriously, if you're kind of beating yourself up, trying to get better, you're probably not that person. You're probably not delusional or any of those things. You just might be overly harsh on your own work. So anyway, I know this was a bit of a less detailed update because I had to I got a little bit behind. I had to finish that, but I do want to stay true to the concept and keep doing these little diary entries. And next week, I promise it'll be more action packed, as it were. Well, it will be more action packed because apparently I have to write action. And I'm about to do a workshop on action. So it's really perfect timing for me to brush up on how to write action as I need to write action. So it's like, wow. What could be better? So anyway, I will yeah, I'll see you all later. Thanks again for all the support. It's been super meaningful, and you have a great week.